progress.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another session. I am joined today by Lindsay. Lindsay, where are you at?
Hello.
With echo. You're fine, Lindsay. And I'm joined by Matt Dixon. Matt, where are you at? Raise your hand.
Right here, Jacko.
The three of us are going to try to do this with or without echo. It is what it is today. We're just going to wing it. Welcome everyone and all. Welcome to, what some would call an event, some would call a show. Whatever it is what it is. I am here today joined by Matt Dixon from the JOLT Effect as well as Lindsay, and we're going to talk about indecision and the way how it helps, involves, and so on and so forth. For those of you who have seen this before, this is a very similar to what we have done in the past, so not something major different. But of course, this time we are joined by Matt Dixon. If there's continued audio problems, then I will just take lead, and Matt and Lindsay can echo in a little bit every now and then. But otherwise, we will just roll is what we've got. Matt, roll in and see if we can hear your voice without echo as we are trying to do this. Give me a heads up. Do you have an echo?
Right. Yeah, I think it's still echoey, Jacko. I might, I'm getting the thumbs down here from the audience. Look, I only like listening to myself once. If that. Twice is rough.
There you go. I'll take it up, but feel free, Matt, if you perhaps can jump in and jump into the chat. It may be on my
I'm happy
end.
to let me be chat guy. How about that, Jacko?
There we go. Matt will be on the chat, and Matt will be helping us live right now with all the things we have going on. Okay, with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain down here that what we've seen historically is that, an average win rate, that there was a huge swing factor. What we learned from some research that Matt and the team have done at DCMI, that there were certain performers that outperformed other performers. And those performers outperformed by a significant rate, about 30%. We want to learn today what made these performers have a close win rate of 59% versus a close win rate from 26%? What is it? What did they do wrong? What we're going to tackle today is a few different things, and we're going to tackle it in a few different ways in order to make sure that there's a little diversity over what we have spoken in the past. So that is what we're going to tackle today. Please reach out through the chat. We're going to look for everybody in the chat to contribute to the talks here, talks here, chat here. And to get us started, if a few of you can start typing in where you're from, what is your location, and where are you from right now? I want to see who we got all across the world. Type it in. Eagle, there we go. Tel Aviv, Naples, Florida. Okay, Vlad. I see all over the world. I saw Eastern Europe, Houston, Milford, Connecticut. There we go. Okay, chat is fully operational. And so we're going to talk about and we're going to share. Now, if you ask a question, right, in the chat, and somebody likes that question, can you please +1 it? Because what we are seeing, as soon as we see +1, +1, +1, we're trying to scroll back and figure out who asked the question, what was it, and so on and so forth. Right, so that's what we're going to do. We have co-hosts with us here. We have Lindsay as my co-host and Matt Dixon is my co-host. Both, for those of you who joined late, will be joining via chat since we have some echoey problems for anyone but me. This is my way to make sure I hold on to the microphone. I echoed everybody. There you go. Okay. So a number of things have happened, and as I leave this slide up, I want to talk you through it. It was around the early 2022 last year. And I would say about, March and April, that we suddenly saw a significant change in the industry. And what that change was, is that we noticed that the win rate started to come down. And the win rate started to come down, and I'm not talking about like a few percentage points. It started to come down for, let's say, an average 32, 33% in enterprise. And in enterprise alone, it came down and to much lower, to where we see today it being as low at $100,000 plus deals. We have entered the 10% range. So we have 12, 13% is a sizable client I worked with 2 weeks ago that had a win rate that low. This is unheard of for enterprise, right? And so this low win rate that we are seeing, which hasn't stopped, right? It has been declining. Now, when I spoke to Matt, actually it started with a LinkedIn message back and forth. I was telling him like, hey, we're seeing this. He mentioned like, Jocko, I'm really doing research on this right now. This is a book I am writing right now. And, like we noticed that was, like that there was a significant interest in the market from this, simply because we saw at that point it was like 28, 27, 26%, right? We're starting to see that win rate going down. And so we discussed like, hey, as soon as the book is out, let's get together and figure out what we can do. Well, when the book came out, as I depict down here, the win rate was in approximately in 26%. And we saw that certain enterprise performers were able to circumvent this, and were able to figure out like something that other people didn't know, right? And as Matt pointed out down here, the biggest swing factor was how these high performers dealt with these cold feet moments. What followed in the months that passed is we started to understand what really was going on. This message that we're about to deliver you today is so vital and so critical, because what we're seeing is that the current behavior actually is exasperating this win rate, the reason why it started falling down, and particularly in Q4. Now, to set the stage even further, it was only about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, that I was speaking to a C-level officer at one of the world's largest, I think it is the world's largest SaaS company. And she was explaining to me, it's like, look, Jocko, the problem is not that deals are no longer happening, or that the deals are still happening. They just take longer. We have to fly in more resources in order to get them on time. We have to pull in literally some of our top executives to fly on location to help them close. These deals were still happening, but they required a lot more effort in order to get them done. And so some of you may say is like, hey, we don't have that, but you know what? The level of delay and indecision that is occurring, we see that a little bit, right? And so I want you to see that there's a problem occurring, deals are being delayed, more effort is needed to close deals, and often people now have to suddenly deal with, as we will see later on, if the CFO and other decision makers are getting involved in this decision. All this is happening right now. And what we're going to show to you today, that the existing playbooks that we have used historically for this for sales has actually started to become having an adverse impact. Now, not only did this apply to the win rate, of the enterprise, we also see that this applied to the win rate of SMB. That is what I'm bringing up down here. What I want you to understand, that the win rate and the win ratio are two different things. And why do I make that point? And I keep that win ratio shadowed out, because that's what we're going to talk about. Because these deals are not being lost. The problem is the deals are not being lost. They're not leaving us. What we are seeing is that the deals are just take longer to win. Here's that what I spoke about earlier, right? We see down here the win rate was 1 and 3. This is the historic pre-2022. And SMB rate, for those of you who are joining us from SMB today, that like shadowy, deeper dark colors, that's the win rate in SMB, and that was about like 1 in 5. That SMB win rate for sure has right now achieved about like 10, 12%. Now, help me out here. I'm going to type an example, and I'm going to say I'm in SMB and my win rate is approximately, and as an example, 18%, right? Or you can say, if even better, my ACV is 20K and my win rate is 18%. Like, that is how I would love to see something. Can you give me an indication, either what you see in your business, what you have, but type in what is your ACV that you're selling and what's your approximate win rate. What are you seeing out there? Whether you're a consultant, a trainer, a VP of sales, a CRO, type in what is your approximate ACV and your approximate win rate if you can. Help me out here. There we go. Thank you, Jeffrey. ACV and win rate. Thank you. 30K win rate for 1,556.25. Yeah, you see, yeah, we see fantastic. Oh, this is, yeah. Take a look at these win rates, people. Take a look at what the win rates are and the ACVs. And what you'll see here, right? And you know, like, and I want to show you how many 10s and 20% there are, right? I just want you to know that that is super uncommon. That normally they're higher. So normally the low end is 20 and the higher end is in the 30s, mid 30s. So I just want you to know, hey, Jacob, I see you there, buddy. Mr. Turner. How are you doing? Okay, fantastic. Okay, and so what we see down here is like, look at these win rates. Look at how low that they are, right? Sorry, I wouldn't, you know, but look how much they have come down. That's the problem we're here to solve today. That's what I want to talk about, and in order to help you with that. Now, what I'm going to set the stage here is that historically there's these three things that we lost. Number 1, number 2, and number 3, right? Competitor, substitute, and status quo. I'll briefly explain what these three are. Number 1 is historically where we lose to a competitor. Budget is spent on a competitor who solves the same problem. Number 2 is a substitute, not to be mistaken with a competitor. And at number 2, they spend money elsewhere. So instead of buying a competing product, they may outsource it offshore with use human beings to do it, right, instead of a product. Or they may spend the money on a security contract rather than on a product. Status quo is that budget is not spent. It is spent totally elsewhere, and may not even be spent. It is an intentional decision to not spend money. Okay, and so they may say, well, I was looking for an email automation solution, but instead I'm going to hire a head of HR. Right? That is when we move to the status quo. Now, these are the three reasons why we lost deals, and often, they're not 100% related to it, but, you win 1 in 3. And so that is where we're coming from. As we are seeing, I've already updated the numbers, because a few moments ago, this was saying 1 in 5 and 1 in 8. This is now has dropped as of January to 1 in 6 and 1 in 10. This win rate is keeps coming down. It is not stopping. As some of you may know, when the win rate keeps coming down and the average contract value at the same time keeps coming down because we're giving discount, that compounds and that makes the entire number and the entire machinery come down. So we want to make sure that we keep a close eye that the win rate coming down by itself is not just a problem. Also the ACV coming down. Also the sales cycle is lengthening. All these things are compounding and causing this result that suddenly people are no longer hitting their targets. And as a result, growth starts to slow down. And as a result, funding starts to run out and the runway starts to shorten up. It's a big, gigantic problem these days. Now, historically, and I'm going to describe this down here, historically over the past 10 years, SaaS sellers excelled at using three very specific playbooks, okay? FOMO, ROI, and FUD. Now, use these, and so if you hear, what does FOMO stand for? Does anybody can help me? Type in, what does FOMO stand for? Help me out. I think that's an easy one. Somebody, fear of missing out. Thank you very much. Now, ROI. Does anybody know what ROI stands for? Obviously, I'm talking to a lot of sales, so yes, return on investment. Okay, so I'm going to talk about FOMO and ROI first. So over the past 10 years, SaaS sellers excelled at working with FOMO. What they said, and particularly what the solution is built around, if you have an innovative software product, you go into your buyer and you excel at saying, hey, we have this and nobody else has it. We do this and nobody else can, and so on and so forth. And that creates a fear of missing out. Now, the reason why post-2008 this worked so well, and particularly starting 2012, became and unlocked the decade of the golden age of SaaS, is because SaaS services, by the very nature of it, are a highly innovative solution. And innovative means that they are able to offset against the established, which, like for Salesforce was SAP and Oracle. This was the nature of why SaaS solutions were so good. They were innovative, and therefore they almost always were using the FOMO, fear of missing out. Don't miss the boat on this. The other thing that SaaS excelled at like no one else is the ROI. Because if you're competing historically against an established vendor with either hardware or software or perpetual software, and you say it's like, hey, instead of $1 million up front, I'm going to charge you like $20,000 a month for the next 3 years, right? Then people go like, oh, I like that. So the ROI of SaaS, by definition, has been historically 10x, which is the reason why most people have been historically selling along the lines of, hey, buy our product, and within a month or within a year you will earn it back. The first deal you win will pay for the product that you just bought, right? Like it pays for it. It practically pays for itself. This created that ROI. And then FUD, I already see that for folks of you that what that means. And like instill fear, and I say that, sow doubt, and create uncertainty. Those are the three things that I want you to instill fear, sow doubt, and create uncertainty. Now, I write this fully out so you understand what it is. What we listen to the calls, many sellers, somewhere along the process, anywhere from discovery call, demo, conversation, is being confronted with a customer. And nearly everyone, even those who say they don't do it, they instill a form of FUD in the customer. And they sometimes say it nice, right? They don't say, oh my gosh, those people are going out of business, you should not spend their money. Clearly, that's a form of instilling fear and sowing doubt. But they sometimes say, well, no, our competitors are really well respected. They're fantastic, and they're well known in the market. Their solution is just 6 months behind ours. Well, that's a form of FUD, right? Saying that is a form of FUD. And so I want you to understand, and so that we get an idea of what happens here. Now, I'm gonna I want you to understand that is a way how we're working, right? That's a way of where we are today. These three playbooks are very, very much used. Now, today, what we notice is that most of these deals are not lost to competitors. We're not winning only a few deals and saying it's like, hey, everything else is going to the competitors or to the substitute. What we are witnessing today is that the lion's share of the deals are lost by clients not spending any budget. They are not spending anything, okay? And so I want you to understand that this is the reason why we are seeing that currently this is happening. And Matt, I'm going to mute on mine on the slide that is coming up so you can speak and see if the echo is on my end. And so I want to make sure that that this lion's share of the deals that are lost by clients because they're not spending budget. This is the problem we're trying to solve. And what we're seeing is that status quo, that we now have entered a fourth scenario. And this fourth scenario is indecision. This fourth scenario that we're exposing down here is that the status quo is actually expanded. There's two kinds that we're losing here. The status quo being, I'm simply I'm committing to making no decision. I valued what I could do, and I'm deciding to go indecision and to make no decision. That's the status quo. What we see this fourth scenario is that the decision is simply not happening, right? There is no decision coming. Now, the reason why we're here and the reason why, I'm so excited to be here with all of you today is that, obviously Matt joined the call. Matt previously wrote the book, The Challenge Sale, which many of you know when it launched in 2012 was for many of us like a hallelujah moment where we go like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Finally, it is somebody understands what is happening in sales and why. Because what Matt and with the book, The Challenge Sale, together with Brent Edison did, is they based it on research. They listened to the calls. They added it up. With the JOLT Effect, the book that they wrote since, or that Matt and now with Ted McKenna wrote since, they again went back to the calls and they started listening. And they started analyzing the calls and so on and so forth. And, I asked, in over that summer period, as I explained this to Matt, and he was explaining that he was working on this, we aligned. And perhaps, Matt, we're going to try out, you can talk to a little bit about what you experienced and how you experienced it. And I'm going to put myself on mute.
How's that? Oh, I'm still getting an echo. Are you on mute now, Jocko? Oh, okay. I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's good? All right.
It's all Jocko's fault.
There we go. It's Jocko's fault. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Jocko and I started talking. It was last summer, right, Jocko? We were in the middle of a study. We had actually, for those of you who know, I saw, Tom, you held up your copy of the JOLT Effect, and I think some other participants today have gotten the book or are working their way through the book. So just to take you back to March of 2020, we actually launched this research study right into the teeth of the pandemic. And the reason we did it was, as sales researchers, we thought this was a pretty interesting time to study sales. We'd always been envious of Neil Rackham and his work in spin selling that took, he traveled around the world and sat in on like 30,000 sales calls. But in March of 2020, you guys all remember that sales went 100% virtual overnight. So every single interaction was happening on Zoom because we weren't out on the road visiting customers, we weren't getting on planes and rental cars and going to trade shows and so on and so forth. So we actually recruited several dozen companies, and we harvested from those companies 2.5 million recorded sales calls. We transcribed all those into text, and then we used a machine learning platform to study them at scale. I mentioned this in the chat, but we looked at 8,300 different unique variables in that model. And as Jocko said earlier, there were a couple of big takeaways. One, we found in our analysis, I shared this in the chat, we found in our analysis that anywhere between 40 and 60% of a rep's qualified pipeline is going to be lost to no decision. That number, I think, has gotten a lot worse for all the reasons Jocko articulated earlier. That was 6 months ago that we pulled that data point. It was bad back then. I think it's a lot worse right now. He's also pulling up a slide here where we did a distribution actually of level of indecision. This is a pretty interesting finding, that if you look at those opportunities, we cite 2.5 million opportunities or 2.5 million sales calls across all these opportunities, we were able to pinpoint the level of customer indecisiveness or indecision being displayed in those calls. And what we found was that indecision is not a disqualification problem. In other words, you can't disqualify out all the indecisive customers because unfortunately that's like almost 90% of the market. There are only 13% of the opportunities out there where the customer is kind of unencumbered by fear of failure. They're thinking about the opportunity in purely rational terms, right? So this was a pretty huge finding for us. Think about this as like the carbon monoxide poisoning of win rates. It's everywhere, but our reps have never been taught to identify it. They exist in a world that we've kind of constructed for them, where we've told them, look, your only enemies are the customer status quo, what they do today, the competitor, or some substitute, as Jocko talked about before, right? And so we've equipped them to go out and defeat those enemies, but we've never taught them that this is actually one of the biggest enemies they face in sales. So they're going in with kind of blinders on, this sort of tunnel vision, if you will, and every indecisive customer to them looks like a nail. So they dial up the FOMO, they dial up the FUD, all the techniques that Jocko talked about before, the ROI, right? And it rings hollow with our customers and it doesn't move them forward. In fact, what we found in our research is it actually makes things worse. The more they hammer the status quo, thinking that's their enemy. They haven't demonstrated the value, they haven't convinced the customer of the ROI, they haven't convinced them to change, or they think that your solution is the same as your competitors. And they keep hammering on those points, and it actually increases the likelihood the deal will be lost to no decision for reasons that we'll talk about here over the next few slides. Yeah, you're actually looking at here. Actually, Jocko, you go back on mute. You're looking at here the negative correlation between win rate and level of indecision. So stating the obvious, the more indecisive your customer is, the lower your probability of selling them anything. Again, we're going to talk about what this is and how it's actually different from status quo bias and the customer's preference for the status quo, what's really going on in the customer's mind when they're struggling with indecision. But Jocko, we can keep us moving here.
And thank you, Matt, for that. What we notice is that win rate, right, and that the biggest swing variable was how people deal with that moment that the customer expresses indecision. And I want to let you know that a few days ago, over the past weeks, I've been working myself with sales leaders, and I wanted to go back to the calls, and I'm listening to the calls of our own sales team, and I'm listening to the calls of some of the customers. And when you hear that, when you hear today's customers express indecision, it's not hard to signal it. In this particular customer that just springs to mind said simply somewhere along the line, "I'm so confused by all the options that you're having." And, like what did our person, on our end started to do? It started to explain all the options as if that was not realizing it was an indecision problem, but realizing, hey, I must not have spoken clearly enough, or I'm, and they went over it. That not necessarily is the right answer. You can, when that customer voice is a form of indecision. Now, the other thing that we notice, and even as you see me here speak today, right, you see all my body language. You'll see that these cameras are quite good at displaying, like some of our emotions. And so sometimes you see a customer on the other hand, really when you say this, and I'm not. This literally happened again last week. With a client, and I said, like, I had flown in for that particular client, and I mentioned to that client that the $500,000 that they were spending on Winning by Design was just the beginning, that we were, like anticipating a significant bigger investment. And immediately the client go like, wait, what? And as a result, you saw the emotion that that their body voiced. Like, I don't know whether that's a form of indecision when you see that, right? And, like you want to bring that up. You don't want to let these things go unnoticed, where in the past we just kept selling. What we notice, and this is the thing that I want to say, what great, performers do, they recognize that and they call it out almost immediately. And immediately means, hey, they may collect their thoughts over 2 to 3 minutes, but they're going to call it out. Okay, and so that level of indecision and recognizing that, what we're really trying to do, if I want to visualize that down here, what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase that win rate right there, right? That's what we're trying to do. And so perhaps what I can bring in, Lindsay, as I go on mute, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the varieties of indecision, and then I'll let you hand it off to Matt for some of the what follows next. So Lindsay, can you talk to us a little bit about how indecision is taking place?
Yeah. So it's such an interesting way. Indecision is coming across in a very emotional type way with our customers. So what Matt and team discovered is that indecision really can be boiled down or rooted into these 3 different types of indecision. So the first one is just, will I make the right choice? So if I'm the person who's signing the contract, I want to make sure that I can't have something pinpointed on me as being the person who made a mistake. So will I make the right choice? The second one is, have I done enough homework? This is so common today. There's so many different things helping people understand what it is they think they've researched or what is out there. Have I done enough homework? Is it going to be the next white paper that comes out? Is it going to be the next study that comes out that's going to be just the thing I need in order to make the right decision? The third type of indecision is, I believe you and I do see how you can have this type of impact on my business. But what if I am the one person that does this, that moves forward, and I don't get the results that I'm paid for? So will I have the impact that I really am paying for in this? So those are the 3 different types of decision. Jocko, if you want to go on to the next slide, there we go. So as Jocko mentioned, and as Matt mentioned, the 3 most common types of playbooks that we've been using is taking people who are already feeling afraid or feeling really indecisive and just hammering in them the fear, the uncertainty, the doubt. If you don't do this today, you're going to miss the boat. All your other people that you're competing with are doing this. Or just simply look at how much money you're missing out on, or look at how much money you're wasting by not doing this. So we try to create urgency by really instilling fear in people. So instead, Jocko, next slide, please. Instead of FOMO, right, the fear of missing out, we're now moving to a new acronym, which is FOMO, the fear of messing up. So the fear of messing up now is our new playbook. This is way more important than the fear of messing up. So people are hardwired to avoid loss. So us avoiding loss becomes more important than maximizing gain. So using scare tactics like these FUD and FOMO and everything we talked about to someone who is already afraid is going to have the opposite effect. So there's a lot of science behind this, right, Matt?
That's right, Lindsay. So this is something, and I was mentioning this in the chat here to Gail's question, which is a great question about Challenger vis-a-vis Jolt and how those 2 play off one another or interface, if you will. So Challenger and I would argue any sales methodology, right? Whether it's Medic, it's Sandler, it's any sales methodology out there, is really laser focused on trying to overcome customer indifference, right? Trying to overcome the customer status quo bias. That is fundamentally different from what Jolt is about, which is trying to overcome something called the omission bias. What psychologists have found over time is two things about, when it comes to decisions. There are two things that our salespeople need to understand. I think the first one is our customers will pass up on golden opportunities sitting right in front of them to just keep doing more of the same because they don't like to change. Getting into the change is hard. People are lazy. They want to conserve energy, like all the stuff we all know very well. But there's another driver of inaction that we found in the research, and it's not preference for the status quo. It's fear of failure stemming from the omission bias. What is the omission bias? In our minds as human beings, there are two types of loss that we think about. We all want to avoid loss. I think everybody knows that. That's why we hold out the 10% discount that's only good this quarter, right? Or that we try to dial up the fund. We already knew that in sales. But there's two types of loss, and this is really important. On the one hand, you've got an error, what's called an error of omission. This is when you experience a loss through inaction. You chose not to act, you sat on the sidelines, and your team, your organization experiences a loss because you chose to do nothing. The other type of loss is called an error of commission. An error of commission is when you make a decision or choose a path of action, and it is because of that decision or because of that path of action that you experience a loss. It is directly attributable to a decision you made. Now, those two things are not one and the same. And as Lindsay just said, it is the error of commission that people are deeply, deeply afraid of. Nobody wants to be on the hook for choosing the wrong configuration of the solution. As Lindsay said before, not having done enough research or not getting assurance from the vendor that they will have their back and deliver the results that were promised, that outcome uncertainty. Nobody wants to be culpable. So when we look at this, what we find is the fact is that our customers are way more comfortable with missing out. They are not comfortable with messing up. In today's economic environment, going back to what Jocko talked about earlier, that's not just a bad look for the customer. That could mean losing your job. You lobbied for a big purchase, a significant expenditure of capital in a tight budgetary environment, and it went sideways. That could mean your job, right? Certainly a loss of reputation, but it could, in today's environment, mean your job. So this is what we need to understand as salespeople. We need a playbook for not just increasing the FOMO, but dialing down the FOMO.
All right. So what are these? So what Matt and team have identified is there's a method to this. So now we know what the problem is. Now we know we need to identify what the indecision is and how to solve it. So the acronym JOLT is the answer to all the issues we're having today. So the J is judge indecision. The O is offer guidance. L, limit exploration. And T, take risk off the table. Next slide, please, Jocko. So what these mean is basically the J is usually manifesting itself. The indecision is manifesting itself as emotion. So there's different forms and different degrees. Customers may be experiencing indecision as frustration or confusion. So we learn how to use what we call pings, or leaning into these indecisions and questions we can ask. So the J is the problem, where we lean in to try and figure out exactly what the indecision is. The O, the offering guidance, is going to help us with the objection of, will I make the right decision? So there's a difference between offering guidance and offering recommendations. So the recommendation is, here's what other people like you have done before to solve this issue. Guidance is really being an advocate for your customer and saying, here's what I would do if I were you. This is what you should do in order moving forward. So the L, limiting exploration, huge issue with all the information that's out there today. This is where we are able to really establish ourselves as the expert and really gain trust from these customers. So looking at how many times have they had this conversation versus us having this conversation multiple times a day. So making sure that they don't have the objection of, have I done enough homework? Let's just limit their exploration in the way that they're looking into this information. So taking risk off the table, the T is really looking at what is the fear of perceived risk. What do they think the risk is versus what is the actual risk of moving forward? And this is going to help us with, will I get the results that I paid for? So Jocko, how would you tie all of this together? Oh, there you go.
Well, I would do it as follows, and what I'm going to describe, and as I try to type as well and as quickly as I could. I want to describe to you what originally was my challenge, okay? And What you see down here is what we in our industry, in winning by design, which are referred to as a blueprint. So I'm going to take you through the experience so you get what the challenge was and where it happened. So the challenge originally for me was, and the way how I drew it originally and even communicated that like months ago, and as I learned about it, is I did something majorly wrong, and I don't want you to make the same mistake. I thought that the J, the O, the L, and the T were all mingled, and sometimes I would judge and so on and so forth. But I want you to go to the core of what I'm displaying down here. You see that? I am somewhere in an action judging the indecision. And this action can be on a discovery call, on a demo call, on a one-to-one phone call. It could be on a chat message, right? But I have to judge the indecision. I'm hearing something that I feel like there's an indecision. Then I need to make that decision whether I'm going to offer guidance, whether I'm going to limit my exploration or take risk off the table. I need to intentionally make the decision, which one of these three am I picking? And then following that, like, hey, what are the options? What are the things I can do to do that? That was the major aha moment. So I just want you to understand what this was, right? I'm listening to a call and I hear somebody say that there's a kind of an indecision. Now, help me out here online on the chat. Give me an idea. What have you seen? What have you heard? How does a customer chat line help? I need a rescue line. Give me an idea. Give me, what do you see? Like when you see somebody out there voicing an opinion, either on let's do an negotiation talk. How would somebody in a negotiation voice that they are not ready to go, that there's indecision? Help me out there. Negotiation. Jacob, I'm counting on you to be a non-Winning by Design member, but a beloved former Winning by Design client to help me out here by typing something in to get it started. There we go. We have conflicting priorities. Thank you. I love that. I'm not sure the team is like, oh my gosh, these are fantastic. Got to go through legal. Oh, see? Okay. We need to discuss things. Yes. Now, what you want to do is you want to pull on that thread. You don't want to just go like, okay, well, in that case, let's talk to legal. We need more time. There's another one. We need more time. And so you got to pull on that. When you sense that, you got to pull on that. Now, Lindsay said we need more time, right? But Lindsay, I can imagine if I say we need more time, I'm not going to counter that with, we have an offer. You get 20% discount if you make an offer, if you make a decision by this Friday. That doesn't look like the right answer, right? That is not that is what. Now I'm pushing on the wrong thing. Customer says I need more time. Customer says the deal is too big. We can't digest that. Customer points out to something, say like, I don't know whether we are aligned. All these things, when they're coming through, these reasons that you're throwing out there, you need to tackle them right then and there. You can't just let them, okay, well, please discuss. Here's a few plays on what I want you to think about that. If the customer says, like we had with several of our own Winning by Design customers, look, we don't have $600,000 to spend to train our 400 people. We don't have that right now, right? And I'm making stuff up down here. And so we go like, well, how about we start first with a phase one? How about we first start listening to what the current people are doing so we can write a report on and assess your current situation. And let's say we do that for $50,000. We made the deal smaller. Why? Because in the negotiation call, I heard there was an objection on the price. I see there was indecision, and I started taking risk off the table by giving them a smaller deal that they could take. I'm telling you, this sounds simple, and some of you are already doing it. 7 out of 10 enterprise reps are doing what? If they can go for the $1 million deal 3 months from now, or the $50,000 deal, this week, which deal will they take? Drum roll, please, right? We know what they take. They want the bigger deal, and that's, in many cases, in the past, that was the right thing. But not in this economy, not in this market. And so while they push for the bigger deal, they may even bring in another department and say, like, look, I talked to another department, and we can, make the deal from $5,000 into $12,000 if we roll that in, right? That's the problem. And so they're making it bigger, and that raises the level of indecision. If I say, you know what, I understand that you need to think about it, but I have to tell you, our discount is going to end by the end of this week. that is not driving, that is not helping them make the decision any quicker. As Matt turned out, right, it pointed out, this whole error of omission and error of commission is starting to come full in play. Like if you have a team making a decision on the other side of 5 people and you tell that one, you got to make a discount by this Friday, the other 4 are going to go, what? Why are they forcing their decision process on us? This is our decision. This is our money, right? And so these are all ways of overcoming them. I'm going to give you, in the negotiation part, there's a really common one that takes away a lot of indecision. Some of you already do that. And so if you already do this, and I'm going to draw the attention to a mutual action plan. If you already do this, then start typing in and saying what your experience with that is. But what we are seeing is really good to overcome indecision is with the purchase, with the quote, that you submit a mutual action plan. What will it take over the next weeks, months, days, whatever it is, to achieve the desired impact? Not just how much money will it take, not just by which time they need to place the purchase order, but a week by week layout of what is going to happen with the assignment of your resources on your side and their resources on their side to achieve the level of impact. That is a way of helping them take some of the risk off the table. You're literally are guiding them along. Now, I want to point out down here, I'm going to type it in. And Lindsay, perhaps, like as I take another sip of my beloved Red Bull, can you explain to me what guiding a customer is? What is guidance? Why is it so important that we guide a customer?
Yeah. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but guiding a customer is very different than just the recommendation. And I love every time that I look up, Gail is just smiling up there, by the way. I keep just looking at you. So guiding the customer is more establishing us as the expert. So the recommendation is, hey, so here's what we've seen other people do. This is how other people like you have done that. They can take or leave it. When I become, and I'm actually providing guidance, then I'm saying, hey, look, I have done this a million times with people just like you. I know exactly where you're going to be able to maximize impact immediately. If I were you, what I would do is this, and tell them exactly what it is that I would do. It's like recommendations that, and if you think about this, we actually ask for guidance throughout our life in different parts at restaurants and different places all the time. It's what I would do if I were you versus asking just recommendation. And Matt, I see that you have a really good point you just brought up. Do you want to chime in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the key on guidance, Lindsay's right. There's something called the delegation effect. So I think the first thing is to recognize that guidance or options are a double-edged sword. The thing we're not going to propose, or we don't argue for in the book, is to do the old Henry Ford, like you can have any color car as long as it's black. Like nobody, the customers don't like that. Options are great. Options are great on your website. Options are great at your booth at the trade show. Options are great in those early sales conversations. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Like your reps can be bobblehead dolls and they can say yes to everything. Like roadmap items, different configurations, different integrations, partner ecosystem, you name it. But at some point, that choice overload will work against you, and it leads to lower win rates because customers feel like the safest choice in a world where everything looks good is to choose none of the options and sit on the sidelines because they don't want to be blamed. So as Lindsay's talking about, the first thing to do is to narrow up the consideration set. And the key move there is actually telling them what not to buy, right? Even things you sell. Like I don't think you need the premium version of the solution. I wouldn't roll it out enterprise-wide. I'd actually start in this narrow use case. I would delay those integrations. I think those are nice to have, not need to have for you right now. And getting to a narrower set of options to consider, and then personally recommending one. Now, when that happens, reps are able to harness what psychologists call the delegation effect, because it shifts the burden of a bad decision or a bad choice from the decider to the recommender. So it's like Lindsay's talking about, you go to a restaurant, you don't know what to order. The wait person says, well, this is my favorite dish. It's our most popular. Here's another option I really like, but everything we make here is great. If you order the dish they recommended and you don't like it, it's not all on you, it's also on them. That's a very simple consumer example, but it turns out in our data, we found the same effect you find in B2B complex sales, high dollar value, agreements or in contracts and sales. You find that delegation effect is very powerful. It takes the burden of a bad choice off of the customer's shoulders and puts a little bit of it on the rep's shoulders.
Yeah, and the reason why this is so important at this particular point in time. You need to put this in context of what's going on in the world, and particularly what is in context of what's going on all around us, like in the SaaS market, right? We see that there's a lot of pain currently being by our customers. Cost reduction. I mean, go to layoffs.fyi, right? You just want to make sure that when the customer at this point in time steps into the call, that you are aware of their context and that you're not stepping in and trying to make that deal bigger, push for harder. And this is the reason we cannot blame our salespeople that the win rate is dropping when those things we have been teaching them for the past years now are having a counter effect. Let that sink in. Those things that they have been doing over the past decade, the golden age of SaaS, that decade, this is what the things that work no longer work as advertised. Right?
Jacob has a good question, Jocko.
Yeah.
Jacob, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Yeah. I was wondering, based on this, what happens when you attempt to guide somebody, but they don't fully trust you. So you're guiding them saying, this is what I would do. And then the customer it's falling on deaf ears because they have no trust in your ability. They don't see you as an expert. They don't see you, providing them the value beforehand. So now it's just gone. So
that's something that's really important. I'll jump in on that one real quick. So there's a very powerful effect that happens even before your rep says hello to a customer, which is the principal agent problem. The customer believes, exactly as you said, that your job is to sell them more than they need, to hide the dirty laundry, to not tell them what doesn't work in your platform. You're definitely not going to have them do a reference call with people who hate your solution, right? They believe it's a cat and mouse game, and their job is to figure out what you're hiding from them. And so that's why they spin their wheels and do lots of research, and they won't take your recommendation at face value. What we found in the analysis is best reps actually use principled moments early on to build up a bank of goodwill that they later cash in on. And the way they do that is they tell the customer, this is what you shouldn't buy, right? Again, I don't think the premium version is necessary. I think the basic version or the essentials version would be just fine. I don't actually think that partner integration is important for you guys right now. Would actually spend your money elsewhere. I don't think you should roll it out enterprise-wide. I think we should start a bit smaller. And actually, we even found reps confidently telling customers, our competitors are actually much better at this than we are. We've chosen to deploy our resources elsewhere. But if I were you, and that's what you're trying to solve for, I don't know that we're the best solution. I'd love to sell to you, and I'd love to add you to our brag sheet of logos, but I don't think we're the best partner for you. Those moments teach the customer that your job is not to oversell them and put one over on them, but rather to get them to a great decision. So I think your question is spot on. Your recommendation can only be trusted when you've actually taken those steps to teach the customer, like, my job here is to get you to a great decision. It's not to sell you the biggest thing possible as fast as possible, oversell you, put one over on you, and hide the dirty laundry.
The reason why I'm excited to jump into this particular part, the reason why I'm like itching at this point, right, is for the following. The moment we start looking at what sales people currently are doing, and we can't blame them. Have they been trained on this? Have they been trained on, hey, did you hear the customer's indecision? Now, many of you have gone recorded calls and so on and so forth, right? And other technologies like it. We all have Zoom sessions that are being recorded. Are we actually listening to those calls for the indecision? Early on, can we recognize what are the 3 levels of indecision that are being voiced during a discovery call? What are the 3 kinds of common indecisions on your product that we see during a demo? What are the most common level of customer voicing indecision? And what do we recommend? What do we recommend against it? Which action would you take in this case? I can give you a practical example. If you're selling $20,000 platform sales and you're telling everybody to read the JOLT book, but you don't give them the guidance that they need for this, you may see all those $20,000 deals suddenly drop to $5,000 deals, or you may see a $150,000 deal suddenly dropping into a $10,000 deal. In the moments in time that you go like, folks, you just, what you suggested, Jocko, Matt, and Lindsay, torpedoed my entire funnel. You need to think about this. You cannot just go in and say, well, let's try this out. This requires training. Now, many of you, let me ask, and who, by type in a +1, who can drift a car? Who can drift a car? Okay, +1 if you can drift a car. I can't. Well, I used to when nowadays I got an automatic. But who can drift a car? +1 if you can drift a car. Drift a car is going through the turn, with your tail end. Okay, somebody can. Come on, there we go. Jeff, there we go. So a few of you can drift the car, right? And I will go to Jim in a second with a great question. Now, when you drift the car, right? Which direction is your steering wheel position? Where are you steering towards? In order to drift the car, what do you have to do? Yeah, tell me my Toyota RAV4. What do you have to do to drift the car? You got to steer the opposite direction. Now, Andrew, just type it in. Is it once you can do it, is it hard to do, or is it just once you do it, can you keep doing it as long as you want, as often as you want it? Is it hard or easy to do once you know how to do it? Muscle memory, right? And so what you'll see down here, this is the same thing. It's not hard to do this, but it is if the people have not been trained to do this. It is if they don't understand when to do it. It is if they don't know, hey, on ice you have to do something different than you have to do it in sand, or you have to do it, there's different things, different scenarios. That's what we need to train. Okay, Jim, piping in with a question. Perhaps I'm going to hand it off to Matt. Matt, can you address Jim's question? I see that you're already typing it in.
Sorry, I missed it. Jocko, where was Jim's question? Was it about drifting? I don't think I'm going to be very helpful.
It's Jen's. It says,
oh, Jen's question. Sorry, I did answer that one. Yes, good, a really good question actually. So what's the business case? I think is really what, to go back to the ROI, right? What's a business case, Jen? And as I said, this isn't, I don't think in our materials today, Jocko, but listen, there's two pieces of that. And I've been talking to sales leaders about this a lot. I think everyone's focused on above the funnel drive. Jocko, how many questions do you get about, I need to get my reps to prospect and I need them generating more leads? Like it's happening all the time. And people think it's more of an opportunity, kind of above the funnel lead gen is the way out of this. What I would say is when you're losing 40 to 60% of your deals to no decision, the answer is actually in your reps pipeline right now. I'm not saying don't focus on lead gen in generating opportunities, but there's a lot of opportunity in there in the pipeline that your reps are wasting time on because they're using the wrong playbook to try to get people across the line. The second thing we see in the data, I mentioned this in my response to Jen. So almost a 2x, if you look at opportunities, I see if I can do this by memory. When you look at decisive customers, remember, that's only 13% of the market. So there's not a lot of them out there. When you look at decisive customers, average performers convert almost 40% of those. JOLT sellers convert almost 70% of those, 69% win rate. But again, that's the minority. If you look at the moderately indecisive customers, what you find is average performers convert at 26%. High performers at JOLT sellers convert at 57%. So it's more than it's like a 2 something X greater win rate in the moderately indecisive. The highly indecisive customers, the people with not just cold feet, but they're like Han Solo encased in ice. With those folks, average performers convert at about 6%. So it's a really abysmal win rate with deeply indecisive customers. High performers, JOLT sellers convert at 31%. So it's more than a 5X greater win rate there. So I think when you're thinking about going to senior management and saying, hey, this is the thing we need to teach our reps to get better at, I think that's the answer, right? We are losing to no decision all the time. And we have a playbook here to dial down the FOMO, documented with research that we can use to help drive greater win rates and better leverage the opportunities already in the funnel.
Matt, and the reason why, I'm keeping you side by side here for a second, is like the following. Like, when we say that this is happening, right? When my worry is that in this market, people are making an adverse decision because of the lack of education, because they don't know any better, right? And so there's not bad intent, or it's not like sales reps are doing this. And when we see currently performance going down, right? And so what do you think about it? How if you're a CRO on this call, right, and you now listen to this, what do you need to do next? Where are you going to take this?
Yeah, so I think it's really important what Jocko is saying. Our reps aren't doing anything nefarious. They're not intentionally going out and increasing no decision loss rates. No rep in the history of sales ever wants to do that. They certainly wouldn't do that to themselves. What I would say though is that I'd include us. Like, look, when we wrote the Challenger Sale, we talked about how challengers are really good at overcoming the status quo, dialing up the FOMO, the pain of same is worse than the pain of change, all that stuff, right? But we've told our salespeople that's your only enemy. It's your biggest, if not only enemy in sales. We found two things. It's not your only enemy. It's, yes, static score is the big one, but indecision, fear of failure is actually the second one. And the second thing we found is the bigger of the two. And so we've got to equip our reps now with two playbooks. Whatever your methodology is, continue doing that, right? You should be world-class at that. Whether you're challenger shop or you do anything else, you've got a playbook get really good at executing it to overcome the status quo, because it's a big enemy in sales. But once you've done that, once the customer said, I agree, what we're doing today is not good enough. I agree that you are the solution provider we should work with. I agree this is a top priority. Then it's time to be shifting gears into risk mitigation, right? Not dialing up the FOMO because they're already bought in. It's dialing down the FOMO, because what takes the place in their mind of all the fears about whether we should move, once we've answered the why now or why change question, what they start worrying about is, but how, I know I want to do business with you, but how to do business with you? You showed me so much. What should I choose? Have I done enough research, or am I going to be surprised after this decision is made? Is some bad piece of information going to come to light that makes me look bad as the person running this buying group? And lastly, do you have my back? Are we going to get these benefits you're projecting, or I'm going to be hauled into the CFO's office to explain why we didn't get what we paid for? And so that's what the JOLT playbook is really all about.
Fantastic. Now, as we wrap up, I see Michael coming in, right? Michael Raubach posing a fantastic question that gets a lot of likes. And Michael makes the point that, hey, we already made a pitch to a bunch of companies, right? And they have been indecisive. What do I do now? What I want you to understand, Michael, what I would first do is determine what is the reason of indecision as best as you can today. Determine what it is. Is it because the price was too big? Is it because you have given them too many options and they're, weigh that out. Then the second thing that you need to do, you got to ping them on that, right? You got to ping, and you don't ping a group on this, you ping an individual, right? So get on the phone. This is often best done, pinging and creating, a response to what you're saying is best done one-on-one. In a call where he says, look, I noticed on the call that there were some hesitations on the price. Did I get that right? Closed-ended question. Yes, you got that right. Okay, may I ask, what's the problem on your end that you can, as far as you can elaborate? You ping them and you get that conversation started. Matt, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the last thing I would add is a ping is a fundamentally different technique than a lot of the techniques our reps have been taught. So they've been taught to ask open-ended questions, needs diagnosis questions, right? Those questions are not super helpful in sourcing a decision. Like if you ask your customer, are you worried about getting fired as a result of this decision? Don't be, you're probably getting shown the door, or that'll be the end of the sales process, right? You're not going to get an honest answer if they do answer that question at all, instead of just hanging up on you. Verifiers are very valuable in sales. Like, are we ready to move this on to legal or finance for review? Very valuable, but it can mask indecision. The customer could say, sure, we can move it on, but I'm still worried that we haven't configured this the right way. I'm still worried we might be left holding the bag. The ping, as Jocko said, is me trying to articulate the fear, the source of indecision that you're struggling with, to get it on the table, to contextualize it, to say, you're not alone. Everybody struggles with this, and get it on the table so we can talk about it. Because fear of failure is not something customers are comfortable talking with. Again, if you ask your customers, do you think you're decisive leaders and managers? 100% of them will say yes. The data tells a very different story, that 87% of them are at least moderately indecisive, if not deeply so.
Oh, with that said, I'm going to wrap it up for today. I want to give you before we go, I want to give you this one final slide down here showing up. What you'll see down here is that over the past, years, we have gone through a number of these changes. This is not the first, this is not the last. I don't want you to think like, oh, this is the only, we got to do all JOLT. This is not. This is just an additional technique. And it is a technique that is very well suited and very well timed for the moment in time we find ourselves in, where economy, we're no longer selling SaaS and as the hip and young solution. SaaS has matured, everybody's using it. You can no longer just use these exciting value proposals because they're buying so many SaaS services, you're no longer just competing with hardware and perpetual software. Therefore, in this, as you'll see down here, we simply have progressed with some of these 5 technologies many of you know and have lived before. We're just adding a new tool in the toolbox. With that said, and bringing in Lindsay, I want to thank all of you very much for attending today and being with us during some of the apparent issues on my end. I want to ask you all, to write, if you see this, take a screenshot, share it on LinkedIn if you can. You'll love, we do these things free of charge. We do these complimentary. Anything that you can do to help Matt's exposure to the book, JOLT, would be fantastic. Anything that you can always point people our direction, that would be fantastic, so we can keep doing these things. With that said, I want to thank you all. Thank you for coming. Have a fantastic time out there this week. And looking forward to see you on the next session that we are looking forward to have in the coming weeks. Bye-bye.
had the time of my life, and I never felt this way before. And I swear this is true, and I owe it all to you.
Dirty bit.
Recording.